Welcome to the Thriveable Journey. We're a new podcast dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs to uncover and embrace their purpose here on earth. As multifaceted human beings, we strive to navigate our financial, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're here to inspire, uplift, and equip you with the tools to thrive on your journey to greatness. All we ask in return is your support. 1, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or 2, download the podcast from your favorite platform. Your engagement, it helps us grow and attract incredible guests who will enrich your life with valuable insights and wisdom. Now, in turn, we promise to keep bringing you content that enlivens, edifies, and elevates your journey, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a human being. And with that, I want to thank you for being a part of the Thriveable Journey. What's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make when they're too focused, though, on working in their business instead of on it?
You know, I don't know if there's anybody who's ever been lying on their deathbed and looking up at their loved ones and their last words saying, I wish I had worked more, right? So if you zoom out, like all of us have the same destination, right? Like life-wise, we're all ending up dead at some point. But we do have this time between now and whenever that moment is. Why not be intentional in terms of how we spend that time? Right? So to your question though, about what are some of the challenges, for folks that have started a business and are trying to figure this all out, be mindful of, what it is you're building and why you're building it, right? I think sometimes when I talk to founders, I hear this idea, there's not a definitive idea of what it is they're trying to build. There's just this bigger mentality, right? But if we step back and you look at why you're building your business and what you want it to be, right, that can bring some clarity. So in any business, there's only 3 directions it can go. There's only 3 ways that a business ends up. We know the one direction we all end up, but the businesses have 3, right? 1.
Yeah. Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Bullied and dunked on. Yeah. Let's get it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Thriveable Journey. Today's guest is Jeremy B. Shapiro, a serial entrepreneur focusing on SaaS, technology, and information marketing. Since 1998, Jeremy has been guiding entrepreneurs to break free from the grind of solopreneurship and step into the business ownership. Through masterminds, coaching, and consulting, he uncovers hidden opportunities, helping business owners maximize profits, scale smarter, and achieve the freedom they set out for financially and personally. Featured on NPR, ABC News, and other news sources and global publications, Jeremy brings decades of expertise and passion for empowering others. So let's just go ahead and dive into this journey of insights and strategies of success with Jeremy B. Shapiro. How you doing, Jeremy?
Awesome. Thanks so much for inviting me on. Stoked to be here.
I am happy you're on. And, it's so funny because you have the initial in your name that I found out. And then I use the initial in my name as a moniker. That's just kind of how it happened as an actor. You are a serial entrepreneur, right? What gave you the bug to be an entrepreneur, period, to get you on that journey?
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur my entire career and beyond. Even back as a kid, I had little businesses, right? As kids sometimes do. But my first real business was during high school. And it got to the point that was growing. And when I was at university, partway through my second year, I had this really, difficult decision to make. My businesses were growing, my team was growing, client base was growing. And I was getting up towards about 40 hours a week of running my business, but also trying to take on a full course load. So at the time I thought oh, this is just a little bump in business. I'll get this sorted out and then get back to school. And so I thought I'd just take a semester off and return. And I still haven't gone back. And, my wife, tells me when she first met me and I shared, oh yeah, I'll be going back to school. She took one look at me and was like, nah, this guy's not going back.
It's not happening.
And, here we are 25 years later. I still haven't gone back to school.
Well, it sounds like you found your calling and you found your path.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone, but for those of us who do choose to go down that path is so powerful. Right? It provides, if done right, this really, really incredible, what I call entrepreneurial freedom. That's made my life wonderful in so many ways, and provided really great freedoms in terms of how we spend our time, where we spend our time, and so on. The idea of like not having that is just so otherworldly at this point in my life. But I understand for some folks that's where they're at, and entrepreneurship may be the path to to not be in that 9 to 5.
For people who don't know Jeremy B. Shapiro or L. Michael Burt, why would they need to kick it with us on this podcast today?
Well, in terms of what our listeners are, going to be finding out about and why they're here today, a lot of that comes down to, seeking out this idea of entrepreneurial freedom, understanding what that is and what that path looks like to get there, who it's for, who it's not for, and, what you might encounter along the way.
You started your business in high school. So you know the world of being a solopreneur, right?
Yeah.
Take us back to the moment when you realized you wanted to shift from the solopreneur to an actual business owner. What sparked that change?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in two ways, and it's a really good question, right? For myself, I remember being at the point, I'd worked as part of a team, even in high school businesses, and as I was scaling up one of my first real businesses post high school, I got to a point many entrepreneurs get to, where you sort of run out of hours in the day. And you realize one of a few things can happen. Either one, you bring on more skilled folks who know things better than you. And sort of a good tip for our listeners is hire people smarter than you, right? Yeah. Or two, you just realize that you can't take care of any additional clients or do additional work, even if it's coming your way, just because you're out of time, right? So we start, leveraging time and others better. And so for me, that came down to bring other team members on to work one-on-one with clients. It also came down to bringing on a project manager to oversee, hires and training and management and client relationships and all that. So that was sort of, one of the inflection points for me. But I also remember really vividly when my wife and I had first met early on when we were dating. I remember being out for dinner, the two of us, a nice two-top in a nice restaurant, looking across the table at each other, getting to know each other as you do on those earlier dates. And here I was with this incredible woman who I didn't realize at that time would be my wife, right? We're just dating at this time. And I had my phone with me. And I kept, looking over and checking my phone. And, client called at some point, and I excused myself to take care of that. And here I was thinking I was the hero, being there for my clients and taking care of them. And it wasn't until I was sitting across from, my wife that I realized there's more than just that. And what am I doing trying to divide my time between getting to know this incredible woman and taking care of my clients? So there was really a turning point there where I said, you know what? After, quote, business hours, my phone's, on silent, not available. I'll check emails and messages in the morning, right? And so I got to really be fully present and, and get to know who she was. And then even when it wasn't being out on dates, just, doing anything else in the evenings, I was very tuned into where I was, what I was doing socially or in the community or anything else. And then during business hours was very focused and, on point in terms of the business side of things. And that was just a matter of retraining clients and resetting the expectation for what normal was.
That's great. When you're talking about that, with the word that came up in my mind was balance. Like when you're starting a business and you're seeing yourself as a solopreneur, but want to take your business to another level, don't necessarily know how. Balance doesn't seem like it's in the vocabulary. How does one create that?
Yeah, sometimes it can be a bit of a push and a pull, right? Some things get more of your attention at certain points of your life than others, or certain parts of your week, your day, and so on. The thing that doesn't work well is trying to split your time in one moment, right? So, many of our listeners can probably relate to trying to get work done while also being present with your kids, right? You got the phone in your hand and you're saying, while you're trying to do something, and you're not tuned into them, and you're also not doing a good job at, whatever it is you're doing on your phone. So you're sort of doing a terrible job of both, right? Yeah. Pick one, do a really good job, be fully present for that, then shift over and do the other, when you create that time for that.
I don't have kids, but I do have great or grand, however you want to say it, nephews and nieces. They tend to want to spend a lot of time with me. what I do love about owning my own business and as an entrepreneur is that I can create my time as time freedom. Even though there's a lot of work to do, I still can say, you know what, I'll put that to the side for right now and let me spend time with them. And I can choose that.
Yeah. That's entrepreneurial freedom. That's giving you freedom of choice in terms of how you spend your time. And that's so powerful. A regular 9 to 5 doesn't afford you that.
No, it does not. What's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make when they're too focused, though, on working in their business instead of on it?
I don't know if there's anybody who's ever been lying on their deathbed and looking up at their loved ones and their last words saying, I wish I had worked more, right? So if you zoom out, like all of us have the same destination, right? Like life-wise, we're all ending up dead at some point. But we do have this time between now and whenever that moment is. Why not be intentional in terms of how we spend that time, right?
Right.
I still remember when my kids were younger, we had met someone else socially, like those groups where you meet up with other newer parents. And these two parents handed me a business card for their kid. And when I say kid, I mean like a 5-6 month old, right?
Okay.
And I thought that was like, that tickled me that they had a business card for the kid, but it had like the nanny's phone number and the parents' phone numbers on there. And it was like, text for play date kind of thing. And so we just got talking, and both parents were attorneys, and they hated their jobs, like hated the work they were doing. They were working crazy hours and it was miserable. But their plan was, we're going to put in they did the math, right? Like we do this for 5 years, right? We pay off law school, all the rest of that. We got enough in the bank, and then we're done. They don't have to work anymore. And like, that was their plan. So from a financial standpoint on a spreadsheet, maybe those numbers look great, right? And their plan was, to work, and then rebalance and don't do any work and be fully present for, at that time, would be a 6-year-old. A 6-year-old who wouldn't have known their parents for the first 6 years of their life, right?
Yeah.
So like, I remember looking at that and just thinking, like, how wild is that balance that you're thinking to go all in, on one side? Imagine if you drove your car like that, right? Taking a hard 90-degree right and a hard 90-degree left, right? Going back to your point earlier about, balance, right? Balance is about making those small corrections, is about a lane change, not, aggressive U-turns on the highway.
This is when I learned what balance is for me. Like riding a bike, right? We learn how to ride. We don't know balance about riding a bike until we practice it. And sometimes we go to the left or to the right. And finally, we know balance, right? We sometimes don't have to get on the bike for years, but you get back on it and balance, you feel balance. And the only thing that you sometimes need to do is just correct it a little to the right, correct it a little to the left, and you have balance. And I think that for me made me realize, it's not like you were saying a hard left or a hard right. That doesn't necessarily work for me.
Yeah. It's these small corrections, right? We've probably all heard the story about, when pilots are heading to their destination, right? They don't just take off from the airport, point in direction and go, right? They're constantly making small course corrections all along the way.
Right.
And that's okay, right? Even the tiniest, 1 degree difference in terms of where they're trying to go, left unchecked, could have you in a completely different state by the time you land, or a different country, right? So to your question though, about like, what are some of the challenges, for folks that have started a business and are trying to figure this all out? Be mindful of, what it is you're building and why you're building it, right? I think sometimes when I talk to founders, I hear this idea, there's not a definitive idea of what it is they're trying to build. There's just this bigger mentality, right? But if we step back and you look at like why you're building your business and what you want it to be, right? That can bring some clarity. So in any business, there's only 3 directions it can go. Like there's only 3 ways that a business ends up. We know the one direction we all end up, but the businesses have 3, right? One is you pass the business on to your kids. Now, like, look, does that really happen a lot these days? Not really. Can it? Sure. And if you think you're going to be one of those, rare breeds that will pass on to your kids, ask yourself, like, are your kids really going to want to continue on with your business?
Do they want it? Yeah.
Right? Like, and oftentimes, even when you think that's the plan, your kids, your grown-up kids, won't agree with you.
Right.
So, let's just set that aside. Might it happen? Sure. But that's not usually the likely path. right? The second option, and this is unfortunately the direction most businesses go, is you run it into the ground, right? You got a good thing going, you watch it peak, you watch it, head down, and then you just turn that sign over and, the shop is closed, you're out of business, and that's that. You close that chapter in your life, right? I've had businesses like that. I've seen clients with businesses like that, and that's not the greatest direction to go. It's your baby, right? It's your business.
Right,
It's something you've built for everything you put into it. Do you really want to just build it to close up shop?
Absolutely
Not the greatest direction, but that is where almost all businesses go.
Right.
The third option, though, is you build your business and you sell it. So given those three choices, pass it on to your kids who don't want it, right? Run it into the ground, or build a business to sell it. Most folks with that perspective look at that third option. And now we get to ask, how do we build our business so it provides for us in our life and supports the lifestyle and everything we want now and in the future, right? And that often comes down to building a saleable business. Now, if your business is just you, how saleable is your business? That can be really tough. So when we start looking at, that perspective of building a business to sell it, and we start asking the question of how do we make a saleable business, that often comes down to having the right systems and the right people to run those systems. The less dependent the business is on you, and the easier it is for someone else to step in and run and own that business, the better.
Right. And you talk about freedom as optionality. I think that's what you used.
Yeah.
What does that mean in a business sense? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah. So entrepreneurial freedom, when I define that, really comes down to that optionality, that freedom of choice, right? It's choosing what you do, who you do that with, and when you do that, right? Now, if you're working a regular job, there's someone else telling you where you need to be and when and what you're going to do during that time, right? So that's the exact opposite of what we're talking about. So as you grow in your business and you hire other folks to build out your team, right? Nobody is saying that with entrepreneurial freedom, it means you're on a desert island sipping, umbrella, drinks, for the rest of your days. Not many of us actually want that. And if you think you do, try it for a week, you might get over that pretty quick, right? Generally, we're in the business we're in because we love it. We're passionate about it and we really enjoy what we're doing. So when you have the entrepreneurial freedom, it's not saying you don't have to work in your business, right? It means you get to choose what you do. If there's a part of the work you do or part of the, one of the roles in the company, you can continue doing that. You can be selective about which clients you work with, which projects you take on, right? You can do the jobs in the company that you love. Maybe that's you are really great at and love being the visionary, or you're the inventor, right? Or the product person. Maybe you love being on the front lines. Maybe you love being the chef in the kitchen, right? You can still do all these things, but it means you now can choose which roles you're doing in the business and really love, the time you do spend in your business.
When someone's growing their business, some business owners, I would say, I'll use the word stuck. Sometimes they feel stuck and like they can't grow the business though. Where do you typically start to identify the growth opportunities within the business?
Yeah, so business growth, when we look at companies that are scaling, typically has these S-shaped curves, right? You sort of flatline, or maybe there's some slow growth and there's some inflection and you start to get that hockey stick, right? Most folks think once you hit that hockey stick, it just goes up, up, up into the moon. The reality is if you let time go on, that hockey stick starts to flatten out and plateaus again. And that's okay, right? So what caused that, right? It might be a new sales channel, a new partner you're working with. It might be a new product launch you have. It might be some great press coverage. It could be any of these different things that cause that growth to go up, but then it plateaus. So our goal is to stack those S's, right? So as you're coming off the tail end of one, you're hitting that growth on the next S curve, right? Now, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what exactly is going to cause that, but we have some good ideas of the things that can help to create that next bump as one's tailing off to be starting that next one, right? So when we're feeling plateaued, that's typically because we don't know how we got where we are, and we don't know how, and we can't play that same tape again and get the same result. Yeah. And so we're feeling stuck, right? We've worked with businesses where, you have a pay-per-click campaign going. And for every $1 you put into your ads, you're getting $4 in sales back, right? So you double down. And now you're getting a 1 to 3 return. So you double down, now you're getting a 1 to 2 return. And then at some point, like it just becomes less effective. You can't keep scaling that forever, right? We've even seen where you have a campaign that's running that's producing a reliable, predictable outcome, and then there's changes, and suddenly that campaign's running negative. So you thought you had it all figured out, right? You thought you could put it on autopilot, but in the game of business, right, these unexpected things that come up, and what was working for before doesn't work tomorrow. So when we're feeling stuck, going back to that same playbook of what worked before won't always get you unstuck. So we've got to zoom out, right? When we do the actual strategic work on the business, as opposed to the day-to-day work in the business, we can start to get unstuck. But if we're limited to just the ideas we have in our own minds, we're going to be stuck with just the ideas we have. So how do we get the fresh ideas? How do we find out the blind spots? How do we learn about opportunities we didn't know about? A lot of that comes down to surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals also on this entrepreneurial journey who are going to share with you what they're up to, what's working, what's not working, and so forth. And the format for these is often in a mastermind setting, right? Napoleon Hill talks about this whole mastermind concept in his book, Think and Grow Rich from the 1930s, right? And it comes down to when you have two or more people in the room at the same time, working in harmony on common goals and all, you have the creation of this third master mind. If you've ever had the experience of brainstorming or trying to solve a problem on your own, and then you talk to someone about it, sometimes just talking about it out loud with somebody else can help you find a solution. Sometimes just improvising with someone or spitballing ideas or whiteboarding something out collaboratively with others unlocks a whole new idea that you never would have found individually, right? But together, you're able to uncover. But really, the most important part of surrounding yourself with individuals and sharing what's going on is you get exposure to the things you didn't know you didn't know. And that is where time and time again, behind the closed doors of a mastermind group, I've seen those key pivots in businesses. That's where I've seen entirely new businesses launched. I've seen existing businesses pivot, new sales channels added, new products launched, all from getting exposure to the ideas of what folks didn't know they didn't know. And that's where you get unstuck and unblocked, is from that peer advisor, from that third-party perspective.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know that you don't know. So you need that core group of people that can give you insight. So you brought up the mastermind. I know that you have a Bay Area mastermind. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain what makes structured mastermind powerful for entrepreneurs? I know you said a little bit about it. What's the secret sauce in that?
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting is everyone who comes into the room, right? There's some sort of superpower you have. There's something you're really good at. There's something you find easy that others find challenging, right? Maybe you're amazing at marketing. Maybe you are a fantastic operations person. You're excellent at hiring. You've got something you're really good at in the business, right? So everyone comes into the room with the things they know, right? Now, the reason people are finding us and coming into, a closed door mastermind is because they're feeling stuck, right? There's some big burning question you've got. Something's keeping you up at night. There's something that you look at and you're like, if I only had an answer to that one question, my goodness, I'd be so unstuck and I could just, go a million miles an hour, right? But when you have a question, right, you can seek out answers. You can find a coach, you can find a consultant, you can find a book, take a course, go to an event, go to a library, you can search online. When you have a question, you can find answers, right? So people usually come into the room with that big question, looking for an answer to that question. But here's what I find so interesting, right? When each person has their hot seat, right, our guests expect they're going to get the most notes and ideas during their own hot seat where they get answers to their question. But the real value, all the pages of notes that people take, are not from their own hot seat. It's actually from everyone else's hot seat. It's when we get to deep dive into everyone else's business that we get that perspective, right? It's when we have that collaborative conversation where people have differing points of view, where they challenge assumptions, right? Where they call people on their BS, right? Where they lovingly nudge someone towards the thing they don't want to be doing, right? These are the opportunities. These are the insights. These are the pivots that are so game-changing for individual business owners, both, professionally in their business and sometimes really even personally in life, right? You're with other people, on spaceship Earth here,
Mhm.
on this journey of life, who have life experience, who've been through the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, and really have that powerful perspective that can be so helpful. So to your question about that secret sauce, a lot of it comes down to curating the right room of people,
Mhm.
right? I know the things I look for when we're bringing in prospective members is we want lifelong learners. These are
Right.
folks who are actively reading books, taking courses, going to events, right? Sharpening the sword and getting better themselves, right? Like that's a really good indication of someone who's going to be a good fit in our room, right? We also want folks who are, who are open-minded, right? Because if people are giving you, input and ideas, and you don't want to hear it, well, then you're not going to get a whole lot of value from the perspectives in the room,
Mhm.
right? Being open to, loving feedback is really, really important. On the flip side, we also want folks who aren't just there to receive, but are also there to bring their own expertise from their superpower, who can contribute to that room and bring their unique perspectives as well. So when we see folks who are just quietly observing or wanting to be a fly on the wall, that's not going to be a great member in the room, right? Because they're just sort of receiving information, but not participating actively in that conversation. So we look for that as well. So there's a bunch more, but at a high level for really any group that you're going to create or be a part of, you want to make sure it's a curated group. It's not just a matter of, someone who has a credit card that'll clear and they can fog a mirror, right? You want to know there's an application process, that members are being screened, and that you're getting the right folks in the room that are going to, both bring and get value from that group.
That's powerful to be just. I know that it should be a give and take, take and give, but it's really powerful just to be in that room with people who have who are like-minded and that are looking for answers just as much as the next. Can you
Yeah.
share one of your biggest entrepreneurial failures or successes, just as a lesson?
Yeah, for sure. So for one of my businesses that we're building up, it was building and growing really fast. We're doing really well. And we were a geographically located business. We were sort of tied to one geography, just by nature of the business. And there was a period where we were just getting phenomenal press coverage. It was like almost every day we were, on TV, radio, print. It was just constant media coverage, which was wonderful. And at one point we got picked up by a publication that had really tremendous readership. And like overnight, the inquiries from all around the country were coming in. And we had people asking if they could license or franchise or, learn about how to run our business model in their geography.
Mhm.
At the time, we looked at that and we were in, our response was like, yeah, that's great. We're not doing franchises. We're not doing licensing because like we're going to be in your territory soon anyways, right? We sort of had that, we did it here, we'll do it everywhere model, right? So we appreciated the inquiries, but we really thought we could do it all on our own. The short version of the story is we did not. That was one of those businesses that sort of peaked and we watched it sort of crest over right around that time actually. And, just go down, down, down. And really the big lesson I take away from, from that multi-million-dollar business that really turned into nothing was that really was a well-timed business in terms of where the markets were.
Mhm.
We had a lot of interest that we could have done a lot with. We could have licensed the business model. We could have, explored that franchise route. We could have trained folks on how to run this kind of business. There's so much we could have done. But instead, instead of looking at the pie as a pie that could be bigger, that we have a slice of, we looked at it and said, we want the whole pie.
Mhm.
And it ended up being too big of a project for us to take on our own, when we could have leveraged, the passion, expertise, budget, leadership in others. So, the takeaway from that is, when you do have the opportunity to have folks be a business owner in an area and help you to expand that business, that can be a really, really positive thing. I had the opportunity years ago to head out to Ann Arbor. There's a company out there, Zingerman's. And one of the cool things that they did as a business is they really worked their way up their supply chain. So they started off as a deli near a college campus,
Mhm.
and they were successful. They were running a really great deli. When they looked at their expenses, they realized one of the biggest expenses for, rolling out sandwiches all day long was bread.
Mm.
So they said, well, what if we opened our own bakery? And so they did. They opened a bakery, and the bakery's first customer, their big wholesale customer, was the deli, right? So the deli suddenly took their biggest expense category, and the money was now going to themselves as a separate business. right? That
Okay.
bakery then also went on to get other wholesale customers, restaurants, stores, distributors, and so on, and sell direct to consumers. So they now had two businesses running. The deli then looked at their expenses and said, well, the next big expense we have is dairy, right? They've got cheese for all their sandwiches. They've got milk. They have cream cheese for their bagels, all these different things. So what does one do? Well, they went and opened a dairy. So suddenly
diversifying real well.
right? So now they're bringing in the cheese, the milk, everything else to the deli. And by the way, the bakery also needs dairy products. So the dairy had two big customers at the get-go, but then also expanded and had all these wholesale customers and direct to consumer and so on. So you can imagine the story repeats and goes on again and again. I think at some point it's like a dozen businesses they have, this whole family of businesses, right? So they're supporting each other and their businesses in their own right. And so there's two things I want to share on that. One for our listeners is if you look at scaling up, one of the things you can do is look at your supply chain. What's your biggest expense? That might actually be the bigger real business there, not just the one that you're running. But two, one thing I think that Zingerman's did really, really well there was for each one of those businesses, it was run as its own business with a co-founder, partner, entrepreneur running it, right? So the coffee importer, the cafe, the deli, the bakery, the dairy, these all had a general partner running that business, right? So that let them expand. It wasn't one person trying to retain control over all of it and run everything. Can you imagine what your day would look like trying to run that variety of businesses all day long? Right?
Too many, not enough hours.
Right. So, really the lesson I got from sort of, my own, passing the peak in that business that I've seen done better elsewhere is this idea of leveraging, leadership and others and having them run things as a business unit, separate business, and so on.
What's up, Thrival Journey listeners and watchers? Look, if you're someone with big dreams of entrepreneurship, but need a flexible way to earn income while building your business, let me tell you about the Orions Group. Through our partnership with Arise Virtual Solutions, you can become a customer support professional, aka CSP, and start earning from home on your own terms. Arise offers a streamlined certification process, getting you trained and ready to work with well-known brands all across America. You can set your own hours, choose the clients you want to work with, and create a work-life balance that fits your entrepreneurial goals. The best part, you don't have to choose between your side gig and your business dreams. Being a CSP with the Orions Group means you can bring in extra income while have the flexibility to focus on growing your own venture, much like I did. Whether you're looking to supplement your income or need a bridge while building your empire, this is the opportunity for you. You interested? If so, head over to www.theorionsgroup.com to learn more about becoming a CSP with the Orions Group. Look here. Support your entrepreneurial journey while supporting the Thrival Journey podcast at the same time. All right, one more time, www.theorionsgroup.com. All right, we're done with the spot. Let's get back to the podcast. That leads into the next question, which is like systems and strategies for entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. Let me make this distinction first. What's the distinction between solopreneurship and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so being a solopreneur, you are an entrepreneur, but you're running everything yourself, right? Moving beyond solopreneurship, you're still an entrepreneur, but you're starting to leverage others, right? You're building out your team, whether it's, a contractor or third-party vendor like a bookkeeper, right? Or a virtual assistant or a part-time person overseas, right? Those are all ways of extending beyond just being a solopreneur, right? Of course, hiring, your first full-time employee also gets you out of being a solopreneur, right? But even then, you can still be in the world of what Robert Kiyosaki would call self-employed, right? For our listeners who aren't familiar, Robert Kiyosaki wrote this great book called Cash Flow Quadrant. And in it, he sort of defines these 4 different quadrants that you go through from being an employee to an investor, right? It's the 2 middle ones we actually care about for the purpose of our conversation here. And that is going from being self-employed to being a true business owner. Right?
Yeah.
There's a huge chasm between those two, right? Even though the way he draws it, it's just, these 4 quadrants, they all look the same. You pull those two squares apart, there's a huge break in the middle there.
Mhm.
So how do we know if you're self-employed or if you're a true business owner? Well, the litmus test that I use is if you close your eyes and imagine for a moment, what would happen in your business if you stepped away from your business for a day, right? Like, I mean, desert island away on a plane for a day, no cell phone, no text messages, like totally offline. What would happen if you stepped away for a week or for a month or for 3 months, right? If you can step away from your business for, 1 to 3 months, when you come back to your business, are you the same as when you left? Has the business grown in your absence, right?
Mhm.
Or do you come back to a dumpster fire and, everything's gone wrong, right?
Right.
For many folks, the answer is the latter, right? You can't imagine stepping away for days, let alone weeks or months from your business, right? However, true business owners can do just that. And the only way you can do that is with people and systems, right?
Mhm.
So if an exercise I love doing with my clients is we map out sort of the org chart for your business, not the people, but the roles in your company, right? And then we go in and we fill in the faces or the names of who has each of those roles. Now, look, if you're a solopreneur, it's going to be your name in all those boxes, right?
Right.
And your first hire or first thing you outsource is going to free you up from like one of those boxes, right? So let's take, the two most common roles I see, earlier stage founders hire for. One is usually like frontline customer service like things, right? The other is like bookkeeping, accounting, and so forth. So as you bring on that first, hire for one of those roles, it's going to take you out of that box. That gives you time back in your day.
Mhm.
So the question is, what do you do with that time? So one of my clients I was working with was a solopreneur. And for him, he recognized that, if his clients had a problem with his hardware that was running their stores and they couldn't reach him, they were offline. And that was a problem. So he felt the need to always be by his phone.
Mm.
And that's good, right? It's his business, his pride and joy, his name on the line. And that's a good thing, right? But it also meant that this was a guy who loved mountain biking, who loved being out in nature and riding his bike in the mountains. Well, there's not a whole lot of cell phone coverage there. So
Right.
what he wasn't doing as a new business owner was doing the one thing that recharged him, that was good for his mental well-being, his physical well-being, that gave him that space and all those good ideas. And that was so good for him in so many ways because he felt he had to be there.
Mhm.
So the first thing we did is we said, well, what do we need to do to get you, back in the mountains from time to time and give you that space? And that came down to hiring a customer service person. So he found someone overseas who was able to answer his phone during business hours, respond to customer emails, and be there as that first line of defense to help customers out. Now, does that mean that he just suddenly went out and was riding his bike 40 hours a week in the mountains? No, of course not. It meant he got out for a bike ride now and then, but it also meant he was freed up from firefighting all day long and being on the front lines. He could reinvest that time in the business on higher value tasks. That meant he could work on product. He could work on sales, right? He could get newer and bigger accounts for the company, right? And he could do all the things to grow the company because he was freed up from having to do frontline customer service.
This goes back to working on your business as opposed to being in your business, and also leveraging, the people that can do the things that you don't have to do. There's tons of people that can do the things that you don't want to do, that they want to
people
do.
who can do the things you don't want to do. There's also people who can do the things that you are doing, but they can do it better than you, right? So like a little hiring wisdom for folks is if you can hire people who are better at the job than you are, then like you're doing great. And again, I'll use that second example I shared about bookkeeping, right? Many small business owners, if they're doing their books, which you should be, are doing it on their own, right? And like, that's not a great use of your time. Even when I was a teenager and had my first business, one of my earliest hires as a teen was a bookkeeper and an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was both for the business, for myself, and so on. And that freed me up to focus on building the business and not needing to do all the day-to-day work of that. And someone, by the way, who was far smarter at this stuff than I was,
exactly.
as a kid, who knew all the legal, the legalities, the complexities, what to do with the strategies and all that, who I could go to and ask advice and seek counsel from, not just someone who came to me and said, what's next, boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a client, the CEO of this multi-million-dollar company, and he was really excited because he had found a VA to do some work for him. This was someone overseas. I think at the time it was like $2 an hour, right, to do some tech work for him. And he was ecstatic. He was like, look, this is like, throwaway money, and I've got someone 40 hours a week to do anything he needs. The problem was this person was constantly bugging the CEO, asking for things. Every time the CEO needed something done, he wanted to fully delegate that, right? But what he was doing instead was he was abdicating, right? And there's a big difference between delegation and abdication. So he was tossing this, I like to say, through over the fence, to this VA, and just wanted the result. But the VA was constantly coming back and asking for clarifications, wanting to understand, and asking how to do things, and was wasting way more of the CEO's time, right? Then had he hired someone skilled. And so in the end, he had brought me on to help out with this. We already had a great arrangement, and I said, like, look, this is taking weeks to get done. Like, I'm considerably more expensive, like orders of magnitude more expensive, but like this will be done in a day. And so he was like, I just need this done. And so over the course of that day, I had no questions for him, didn't need to bother him at all. And we were able to just execute, get it done, and deliver the final result that I knew he needed, because I had the high value expertise that he was paying me for, right? Instead of someone who, the work was abdicated to, who ended up taking more time and it never got done, no matter how much was spent. So hire folks who are smarter than you at the job you're hiring for. And this can now be your counsel. They can now help to advise you, and they can do a better job than you could ever have hoped to do on your own. Exactly.
Exactly. And that kind of allows me to ask the next question, which is, how can entrepreneurs, that are designing their business as such, just create more time freedom? Because I know for me, time freedom is an example of success, because I have the time to create what I want to create. How do entrepreneurs do that for themselves?
Yeah. And I love that you've created that for yourself. And it's so valuable to me, to my clients, and so forth. Like, I really value, the family time we have every morning, and the traditions we have, around the morning, the evenings, the weekends, and so on as a family, and to be able to be so present for all of that. Right. Even when things come up during the day, or, whatever that is. So that's really valuable to me as an entrepreneur. And I know is so valuable to the folks I work with. Right. So how do you create that? How do you get that time? Well, a lot of that comes down to having the right systems and the right people to run those systems. So that exercise I was sharing that I run through with my clients, where we create that org chart, and then we put the names in there. The next evolution of that is to figure out which of those boxes we can systematize the role that we can then remove your name from and task that system to a person. Right? Now, look, when we create systems and you then get someone using that system, it's going to go in one of three ways, right? The ideal that we want is that the person runs the system and gets the result that you want. That's our ideal, and that's where we're going to move towards. But the reality is, earlier on, the most likely outcome is the right person is going to follow your system and get a different result. And it just means the system wasn't there yet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Something you thought was obvious, someone else didn't realize. Right? So this comes down to just iterate on the system, understand what you thought was obvious that the other person didn't, correct and update the system, right? These aren't written in stone. These are living documents that you should be reviewing and updating as you go. Right? So as you go through the iterative process, you'll end up with a good system that others can use and get a predictable outcome. Then what we'll have over time is someone will use the system and not get the outcome you wanted, and the system will have been fine, but the person didn't follow the system. Right. And so that then is a coaching moment of working with that person to get them back on track using the system, or maybe that role just isn't for them. And that's also okay. Right. But we move from it being a system problem to a person problem to then the system person alignment gets you the outcome that you want. Right. So there's an iterative process I use with my clients that helps to slowly extract them from more and more of those roles within the business that lets that business operate without them. Right. There's always going to be things that you can do in the business or you should be doing in the business. And that's okay. It's not an overnight, you flip a switch and suddenly you're not needed in the business. It's a process.
Got it. talking about processes, can you share a specific habit or practice that has significantly contributed to you and your personal and professional success and growth?
Yeah, so this whole idea of like a mastermind. I remember the first time I was in a mastermind setting. This was 20 plus years ago. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was thankfully because of a business partner who saw the power of this and who recommended reading Think and Grow Rich, and who understood this this idea of a mastermind. Had brought me into that environment, and it was really powerful. Suddenly being surrounded by other individuals, right, who are also on this entrepreneurial path, who are also seeing success, albeit in different ways, and being able to share challenges, share successes, and get that feedback, that acknowledgement, that motivation, and the insights was really, really powerful. So for me, that whole mastermind process has been so impactful over decades. The conversations that I've had behind the closed doors of a mastermind have led to literally like back of the envelope business ideas, discussions around that, and then the launch of multiple multi-million-dollar businesses just from the conversations behind the closed door, the rapid iteration, the test marketing of it, the MVP launch, and so on, has proven ideas out and allowed me to launch businesses. If it weren't for those conversations, I'd probably be still doing the same things that I was then, or falling into happenstance. Instead, it was around intentionally investing my time, intentionally investing my money, intentionally investing my resources, focus, and so on, to surround myself with like-minded, growth-focused individuals who wanted nothing but the best for me. These weren't clients, these weren't partners, these weren't customers, investors. These were other folks on that same path, right? And that has been so impactful. And then the second thing is what we're talking about with systems and people, right? Is freeing yourself up by creating systems and then bringing on team members to run those systems.
Good habits. That's a good habit. On this podcast, we really delve into life as it is a purpose-driven life. Even with entrepreneurs, like this is your business, like you said, if you had to love it, what does purpose play in creating a business for entrepreneurs and that can support their freedom?
Yeah, so it's good to understand what it is you're trying to build and why, right, and who you're serving, right. I had heard for years and years this whole idea of like your company should have core values. You need like your mission, vision, purpose, all this great stuff. Love it, right? The number of speakers I heard from stage talk about this, was a lot. Podcasts talk about this, books would talk about this. I go out and get the latest, greatest book on figuring this out. And it would just sort of reiterate the same point of like, you should have this stuff figured out for your company. But nobody wanted to actually explain how to do that.
How to do it. Exactly. Yeah.
And that was until I came across the book Traction by Gino Wickman. That was like the first book that, as I dug into it, it broke down for me, a tactical guy, right? The like step by step, here's the conversation to have and here's what to do. And so it was so eye-opening to finally have the roadmap, the blueprint, the process to go from I want mission, vision, purpose, and core values to have the output be those things. And so I was so excited about, reading this and finally having this. I got a copy of the book, for my team members. And on one of our planning calls, I let them know, hey, you guys all now have a copy of the book. Next Tuesday, we're going to be diving into this and we're going to start the process of figuring this stuff out for our company, right? And so I shared that on the call, sort of teed this up. And then we moved on with, the next stuff on the agenda. And we're talking about something that one of our clients was looking for. And there was some functionality in one of our products that a client wanted. And as we're talking about it, there's sort of always the easy answer, right? That would take care of that one client's one need, right? Or there is sort of the better solution, which more broadly would take care of that client's needs and a whole lot of other needs, right? So as we're talking about this, we're like, yeah, like we could implement this change for that one client, but like, look, if we're going to do it, like we should do it right.
Right.
And one of my team members said, like, I think that might be one of our core values there. I'm like, what's that? Right. Like that was an earlier part of the agenda in the meeting. And she said, like, no, I think you just hit on one of our values. Like, if we do something, we do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm like, that's really good. You know, we weren't going to have a conversation until Tuesday on the whole core values thing, but like, look at the team already surfacing some of these values we had as an organization. And so that was a really, really valuable process to go through, because what's fascinating is whether you document your mission, vision, purpose, and values or not, like they all exist within your organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to just go to what the default is, that, you know, the values everyone is living, or do you want to be more intentional about it? And if you can't tell, intentionality is really important.
It is
So,
important.
you know, I implore our listeners, you know, Traction's a great book, read through that, and then go apply that process. In fact, I loved it so much, like my wife and I sat down so we could have a conversation about like, well, what are our values, mission, vision, purpose, and all that for us as a family? And that was like a really insightful, fun thing to do as a family. In fact, I know many folks who have done that process and have, you know, taken those values they have and created a fun name for it. One of my friends created placemats for the family that lists out, you know, all their values. So at every meal, right, their placemats, you know, have this. Others have made like wall art for this, you know, for the living room, the kitchen, so on.
That's
So
pretty
it's
cool.
not just something you talk about, but it's something you know, can formalize much more.
Yeah. Like a living document, just make it living.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty great. I had a different question, but it just slipped my mind. So let me just I'll just go ahead and move forward. You you have the base, is it Bay Area? Is Bay Area
Yes.
Bay Area?
Mastermind.
Okay. How do now, is that for everyone? Is it just in the area, or is it for everywhere?
You know, it's funny, like many brands, you start off sort of geographically confined. And then as you grow, you realize that, you know, folks in Texas still want Boston chicken, right? So
Right.
the origins of us are here in the Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. But one of the interesting things that happened during the pandemic is as we shifted to a virtual model for a little bit, before coming back to in person, we had folks who were finding us not just around the country, but around the globe. And so our reach really extended beyond just, you know, that immediate Bay Area. You know, and as you fast forward, we had some folks who stayed virtual.
Mhm.
You know, other folks were thrilled to come back in person and join us for any of our different events that we have in person. But we also, you know, it's a hybrid setup. So we've had folks who join us virtually from, you know, around the globe that can still participate, not just in the meetings we have, but really the community we have for our members, founders, and established entrepreneurs at large between the meetings. And that's really where a lot of great resources get shared. That's really where, you know, folks are able to ask for input or get feedback, not just at a mastermind meeting, but really from other folks between meetings as well.
So you could do it virtually and in person as well.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Just your insight on this new generation. I have, you know, again, grandnephews, great nephews, however you want to call it, growing up, and I see them, and I ask them, you know, what do they want to do? They have more of the mindset of business. They want to have their own business, and
Good.
hopefully, you know, as my business grows, like earlier, maybe I can leave it to them, but who knows? You know what I mean? Where do you see business, small businesses and growing businesses in the Generation Z and Generation Z Alpha?
Yeah, you know, I think there was this idea for a long time, like when you build a company, you've got to build this, you know, a business with hundreds, thousands, you know, tens of thousands of employees, right? And there's this idea that, you know, bigger is better. You've got to be, you know, expanding, growing. And what I've seen a lot more of these days is, you know, actually harkening back to sort of that pre-industrial era, smaller business, right? That, you know, it's okay to have a business that's only 5 of you, right?
Mhm.
You can have a successful business that's you in an entirely virtual team, right?
Mhm.
It's okay to have a business that the goal is not just bigger. So I see a lot more businesses these days that are like the old days, supporting the business owner, the community, and the family, right?
Mhm.
And not looking to be, you know, the next, you know, Silicon Valley decacorn.
Right.
And I love that, because when you're on this path of it's got to get to this, you know, $10 billion plus valuation, like that sets you on this very specific path. There's a book I love called Small Bets. And, you know, the whole idea behind that book is that when companies get bigger, right, a lot of their innovation or what made them a huge company was these tiny bets they made, right? And when companies embody that in their culture, that allows them to innovate and try things and be okay with failure, right? When you're a small business, you try something out, it doesn't work, that's okay, you move on. When you're a huge company, you can't do that. And so the book talks about how like the HPs and the Dells and these sort of really big companies, I think they're talking about Hyundai at some point, that they sort of had this mantra of like, if it's not $1 billion idea, right, it's not worth talking about. Because for a company that size, unless it's going to be this multi-billion-dollar thing, like it's not going to make a big difference. But all the multi-billion-dollar ideas, as it were, right? The only way you know it's that big of an idea is because it's already established and developed and you've missed that innovation window. And now you're just following on and building on something that's already there.
Already there, yeah.
Right? So when you're a small company, you can pivot quick, right? So many startups and so many smaller companies start doing one thing, realize their message to market match just isn't there. They try a different market, they shift the product, they adjust things. And it's, the third or 10th iteration is really where they hit the stride and they find the real growth, right?
Yeah.
An established company can't do that. And so in the book, one of the stories they talk about that I love is, Amazon was really well known in its earlier days, or even, to today, for having a culture of innovation. Like as part of your reviews as an internal employee, the question is like, well, what experiments are you doing? What are you testing? What are you trying out? Right? They really wanted to keep fostering that sense of innovation, which was good because Amazon tried a lot of things. Yeah. So for example, if you recall, Amazon had, I think it was like Amazon Marketplace. They were trying to take on eBay, right? They saw eBay was doing and growing, and they said, well, we're going to do the same thing. And they tried it out, right? In the end, after years of running their marketplace, they still only ended up with 2% of the market share. eBay was still the big, online auction place. Amazon, despite their size and everything else, just couldn't compete. And so they ended up shutting that down. Now, if you were a small company, that's just another day in business, right? You try something out, didn't work, and you move on.
Right.
But for a company the size of Amazon, man, shareholders and the board were calling for a business's head, like he's got to go, like he tried this and he failed. That's a screw up, and he's got to get gone.
It's a whole different arena,
right? But business came back and said, like, no, right? It's actually our culture of innovation and us trying things out that have led to all the greatest things that have made Amazon what it is, right? Their whole subscribe and save, click to buy, Amazon Prime, all of these were mere experiments they tried out, right? They got some traction and saw success, and those are like the things that make the company who they are today.
Right.
So it's only because of that culture of innovation and keeping that alive, which is really hard in a big company. But they were able to act like a startup and have things like AWS, right? Amazon Web Services, which like runs most of the world now, right? All these things come from that culture of innovation. So continue to do that, but don't feel like you've got to be a huge company, right? You can have a small business that serves you and your community well and takes great care of its team members and is not trying to become huge, but can be, an innovative and still small, successful business.
Yeah. A couple of podcasts ago, we were talking about innovation, and it's really great especially with small businesses. Just be purposeful in who you are and innovate, and if you need to pivot. You can do that as a small business.
Yeah. When like this is just a broader question you can ask a lot. If you know what success looks like that airline, the airplane pilot, adjusting course as you go. If you know what success looks like, you can course correct to make sure you hit that, right?
Yeah.
And that applies to like when you create a system for someone, is it clear what success looks like for running that system, right? When you're hiring someone, is it clear what success looks like for that role, right? When you're building your company, is it clear what success looks like? The more clarity you have on this stuff, the more easily you can decide what to do and more importantly, what not to do. Otherwise, you might just end up being a typical shiny entrepreneur who's constantly jumping at the next idea, next opportunity, next marketing channel, and not seeing things through to completion, right? And saying yes to everything at the expense of like the one thing that really matters. So be intentional and clear on what success looks like.
Be intentional. Sometimes it's good to say no.
It is really good to say no.
Because you can't follow every path that, I think you said, something.
Shiny.
Shiny. Yeah, that shiny object. Oh, this is great. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, squirrel.
It's not always there. Yeah.
Look, one of the things that makes a lot of us entrepreneurs I find there's sort of like 3 checkpoints that entrepreneurs go through, right? One is that like we see gaps in the marketplace, right? We see opportunities where others don't. We see a problem, we're like, this could be better, right? Most folks just accept it and move on. We see an opportunity there, right? But that's only because of that ooh shiny mentality. Others don't see it. They got the tunnel vision on. We see what could be better. The second thing is we see a solution to the problem, right?
There you go.
Where others might just see the problem and complain about it. We see the problem, but also a solution, right? And that's like the innovator in us, right? That's the part of us that's like, hey, I bet there's an opportunity here. Let's do something about it. But that brings us to the third point, where others might see a problem and also see a solution. Us successful entrepreneurs do the third thing, which is we execute on it. We do something about it.
Take action.
We see the problem, we create a solution, and we go with it. We get it to market, and we actually build a business with that.
That's the difference. And for people who do listen to the podcast that are not entrepreneurs, these are ideals that you can actually apply in your life as well. As a being a boss in your career, or growing your family and making it a success the way that you want to make a success. So it's not just in entrepreneurship that you can take these ideals. So that's really good information.
Thank you.
You recommended 2 books. Traction, who was that by?
Traction is Gino Wickman.
And then Small Bets.
Yeah, Small Bets is it's Little Bets.
Little Bets.
Yep. Little Bets is Sims. Peter Sims.
Okay.
Yep. And the other one we're talking about, Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. Yep.
All right. So
we covered a handful of stuff. I'll send you stuff for show notes as well.
That's cool. It'll be in there. So we got those 3 recommendations. People should go ahead and check those out, as well as your mastermind. How does one get in touch with you and your mastermind?
Yeah, you can find out about the mastermind group, how to test drive a mastermind, how to start a group on your own, what makes a good group, and everything. All that is at bayareamastermind.com. I also chat about this stuff, quite a bit on LinkedIn. So you can also find me at, Jeremy Shapiro on LinkedIn.
And you have an Instagram as well.
I do, yeah.
Okay. So Instagram, LinkedIn, and the actual website itself. And before we go, can you leave listeners with one piece of advice, a story, last words about anything that you want to leave, or just breaking free from the entrepreneurial grind? If you could leave those last words, what would it be?
So, whether it's parenting or running a business or, doing whatever it is you're doing in life, right? I always find comfort in the idea that there are generations of people across the world for thousands of years who have faced similar challenges and have found a way through. So you're probably not the first person to face the challenge you think is unique and special to you. There are others out there who have faced similar challenges and found a way through. So when you're feeling blocked or plateaued or stuck, right? You don't need to go at it alone. As an entrepreneur, it can be lonely at the top, but surround yourself with like-minded individuals and be open about sharing what's really going on. You'd be surprised how often someone else has a similar experience that they don't talk about that can lend the expertise, the resources, whatever it is to you when you need it most. All you have to do is share what's really going on with the right folks. And you'd be surprised who can unblock you and who can, bring you the resources and expertise that you need.
That's good. That's really good. And I want to thank you, Jeremy, for being on the Thrival Journey podcast. You have tons of information that I'm going to have to digest and look through the show notes myself again. And for our listeners or watchers, they can always go to the Facebook, the Thrival Journey podcast, on Facebook to get, some of the show notes and also clips of this video of the podcast, so they can, attune a little bit more. So again, thank you, Jeremy, for being on the podcast. And as we always say around this time, let's make thriving our new normal. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for inviting me on the show, and let's make thriving our new normal.
I love it. All right. Thank you.